Looking for clues in Silo Season 2, Episode 4, The Harmonium. Starting with, we do not know why we're here. I am more confused than ever now about what's going on in the silo. I kind of sort of talked myself into believing that maybe robots or AI had put people in the silo to watch these server rooms for reasons. But here we learn from Bernard and Meadows' exchange that there was some kind of like hidden code or messaging in hard drive 18 that Meadows had decrypted, and it was from the original head of IT way back in the beginning of the silo. So that kind of implies that whoever built these silos and like set up who would be in charge of the silos was at least partially human, if not a wholly human team. Looking at the cast's individual level to be here, starting with Judge Meadows, she obviously dies at the end of this episode, but I am still really like caught up on what her motives could possibly be. I couldn't for the life of me figure out why she wanted to go outside, as she must know that she would eventually die out there. It had really got me like caught up on this idea that maybe they're just like in a zone, and if you go past that zone, it's safe to live outside again. Or there was a counter argument to me that perhaps she feels so alienated and so alone in the silo that she would prefer death on her own terms. The information that she was Bernard's shadow and was happy as a shadow, decrypted this secret information in hard drive 18, disappeared for 4 days, presumably taking the hard drive with her and like distributing it out to the population, and then came back and retired as Bernard's shadow. Like, why did that sequence happen that way? What was on the hard drive? Why did she feel the need to distribute it? And does all of that stuff like tie into why she wanted to go outside? Does she know something extra about the outside or something extra about how the silos operate that make like it preferable to be outside? Also, R.I.P. Meadows, you're the only person in this whole show who is being proactive instead of reactive. I do think we get like a great character mini study when we compare Bernard, Rob, and Meadows here for this last episode with Meadows alive. Because Meadows is out there making moves, making appearances that make her allies uncomfortable, but eventually benefit them when they get to see the dust settle. Bernard is simply reactive. He is just waiting for things to happen, and then he wants to go exactly by the procedure in the handbook, even if the situation he's in is not exactly what it's saying in the order. And it's interesting to me too, because it seems like Meadows' path forward probably would have worked. This other angle where they decide to kill Meadows and blame it on engineering and therefore start a war with engineering as the main antagonist, I think has like secretly doomed this silo. It's just like Knox in specific seems to be the only person who's been holding back this war. He's been on Order's side for the longest because he thought that's how he'd spare the most lives and keep people the most stable. But if they're not going to give him any opportunity to do that, then he's going to go on the warpath. And I think he has the resources, the loyalty, and the means to really overthrow whatever else is happening here in the silo. Rob is also kind of proactive, but where Judge Meadows has been proactive in a way where she's attempting to de-escalate things, Rob only seems to know how to throw fuel on the fire. We don't know whether or not him recruiting Kennedy to start like a little bit of a riot in engineering was his plan or Bernard's plan, but I'm leaning towards it being mostly his idea because he's the one who does all of the work and it like matches his MO for problem solving. He recognizes that Bernard's confiding in Meadows, they have some kind of previous relationship, and Meadows is blocking him from getting that shadow spot. But his way of like confronting the situation isn't to talk to Bernard or to talk to Meadows. It's to like try and impeach Meadows and get her like killed or make her more of a liability than a boon. And honestly, this really sucks because I feel like if he had talked to Bernard for even half a second and Bernard had had an open and honest conversation with him, which might be beyond that character's ability, he could have been like, yeah, Meadows was my shadow. She refuses to pick that role back up, but I need someone who already is like looped in during this crisis time, and once the crisis is over, I can have you be my shadow. Billings' life is about to really suck in this show. He's kind of been fence-sitting, like using his time in judicial, but also like appreciating his sheriff role, following very strictly to the pact. But things are building and escalating for him now in ways that are going to really force him to make a choice choice, and I don't think it's the choice that the higher-ups would have wanted him to make. Because he was already sort of suspicious of Bernard and Rob and whether or not Jules had said she wanted to go outside. He shared that information with Meadows and was willing to let it go and let Meadows, like, do the investigation and stuff. He is definitely gonna see her death like they've executed her to keep the truth silent. And he already knows from his time shadowing Jules while they were, like, tracking the Kennedy case that judicial pins crimes on people that they did not commit. He's here in engineering, face to face with these people, like, seeing them being reasonable, seeing what they want, seeing that they're, like, as scared as everyone else in the silo. So he's not as likely to buy into the demonization. And even if he was, he is, like, a lawman, so he wouldn't necessarily see this revolt as something he could approve of. Plus, while he's in the Down Deep this episode, he gets to see how fast and loose Judicial is playing with the rules, how little they're explaining everything to the sheriff's department. They took the kid's body and not Kennedy's. He identified who Kennedy was because that was the man that he investigated with Jules, and he identifies that that person is probably not dead, which means there's just like a lot of little threads and nitpicks and stuff that Billings could pull out and unravel Bernard and Rob's whole scheme. And it also is like very tensely setting up an alliance between engineering and the sheriff. And we know when that alliance happened in Silo 17, it spelt the end for them. We saw Lucas, he was still trying to like weasel out of his punishment. He's finally going into the mines. Hopefully he'll be in the Down Deep, in place to be helpful in later episodes. Meanwhile, on Silo 17, Solo is becoming a more and more interesting character. It appears that he might have been 11 when the original Silo revolution happened, which had me asking, like, can children be shadows? And if not, is it possible that Solo was Russell's child and Russell was just sort of like giving him a lot of secrets and information and kind of like preparing him to go into the role, and or just like couldn't keep this information to himself? It gives me a new perspective on whether or not what's in the vault is actually the primary goal of these silos, because I can see a father like Russell putting his kid who knows enough in the vault, telling him that it is key he stand there and guard the vault and keep anyone else from coming in, and then like leaving him there more for protection for his kid during this like tumultuous time than because what's in the vault is actually that important to him. And like an 11-year-old kid takes his father's orders to heart, he knows his dad's a really important person, and he keeps living and executing on that will long past whenever whatever is in the vault is important or not. And that would also sort of like help me out with why he feels like he can just share so much information with random people, or even like if he considers Jules a friend, because like that exuberant 11-year-old child whose dad shared all that information with him, he might not realize how uncommon this knowledge is or how like classified it is. And certainly being isolated like this would keep Solo mentally at the same age he was when he went in the vault. Now, of course, it's possible Solo was older when he went in the vault, like that much alone time would mess up an adult person's mind too. Also, I found it very suspicious that he like dismissed the weird number combination in the classroom wall. He has been like so specific about everything in this silo up until now, wanted to tell her like background information and details about these elements, wanted to like touch and play with stuff, especially when it appears like it's some kind of sequence for decryption. Interesting. And also, I found Solo's paranoia over the vault pretty interesting. Could just be a tick he has because he's protecting that vault for so long, but it's equally possible that he is aware that there are survivors, or maybe that he fears there might still be survivors. Meanwhile, Jules' mission is the same. She made a little progress on getting the firefighter suit so that she could go back outside and warn her vault about the dangers. I had originally thought that perhaps that would be a whole season-long goal, but it seems like she's pretty much ready to go right now. We do not know who built the silo. We're getting some more lore drops on that information. For example, there's a human who's the first head of IT, and they felt the need to send a secret message encrypted in code down to past iterations of his role. As things stand in Silo 18 right now, it seems like the head of IT is like the ultimate, most knowledgeable, most powerful person. I feel like Bernard could do anything he wants for any reason. But it seems like the original head of IT, whose name both Bernard and Meadows know, ago had significantly more limited power or control or ability to move and change than these current iterations do. And that's why he had to send some kind of like encrypted message down the line. The names in the drill room sort of suggest that there's been a rebellion pretty much every generation. But I find that highly suspicious because Mayor Johns had had like 70 years of peace, and she hadn't sent someone out to clean in so long the screen was actually like dirty out there. Plus, Mayor Johns looked through all the journals previous mayors had kept looking for some kind of precedent about a sheriff going out to clean, and she found nothing. So presumably there's nothing about any of these rebellions in those journals either. I guess we don't know how big these rebellions or uprisings ever got to be. It's possible they were there and they were just a footnote to Mayor Johns. It's possible they're editing all of these mayor journals. It's possible the memory drug in the water is doing something. But I'm finding that memory drug super convenient. Like, it's doing so much heavy lifting right now for nobody to remember something happening once every generation. Also, Bernard has a VR headset that looks sort of like our modern technology, and he has a video from 2018, Costa Rica, giving us a little bit of a timeline about when things were still good and what kind of technology they might have had going into the vault. This might just be coincidence, but I noticed that Judge Meadows found that encrypted message 25 years ago and spent 4 days like AWOL. The same time that Walker had something happen where she left her wife, went down to mechanical, and became agoraphobic. That feels more than coincidental to me, but I don't have any more to go off of. And we do get to learn that Silo 17 and Silo 18 have different lore. Silo 18 has Freedom Day and Silo 17 has Founders Day, which says to me they do have separate histories, so maybe whatever is the story behind Freedom Day is at least partially or mostly true. Any differences between these two silos sort of like hints to the truth of what happened in them, because stuff that's like exactly the same, like their layouts, the room, the way jobs are held, the stories they're told about outside, how people react to the possibility of going outside, all of that is like prefab. But like Founders Day versus Freedom Day must mean that there was something different they were marking in their own personal isolated histories. We do not know why everything outside the silo is the way it is. I really don't think we got anything new about the outside in these episodes, except for the fact that Bernard didn't want Meadows to go outside, but that could be for a whole host of reasons. It could just be that it's more convenient to have her body, even though he could have more or less done the same thing if she went outside without the body. It does have me leaning just slightly towards the idea that Meadows might survive outside, or she might have discovered something outside, or like letting Meadows outside in some way, shape, or form might have come back to bite Bernard. And I'm also questioning whether or not Bernard has his own suit, or if what he said there was a lie to sort of like imply to Meadows that what she wanted wasn't that unusual. We do not know if it's safe to go outside. Again, no information there. And I think that's pretty much all of the hints, clues, little things I wanted to analyze here in episode 4, Harmonium. But talk to me in those comments down below. Did you have any new and interesting breakthroughs on what's going on in the silo? And if you got this far with nothing else to say, give me a fireman hat emoji in those comments down below. And as always, keep reading.